Welcome, everyone. I, Councilmember Tola Martz, call the Tuesday, October 15th, 2024 City Council Services, Safety, and Parks Committee to order. First on our agenda this evening will be public comment. There are multiple public comment opportunities at tonight's meeting. There's a general public comment opportunity at the beginning of the meeting, or you can make comments after the presentation and council question and answer period, but before council deliberation on specific agenda items. Members of the public may address council at this time, in person or virtually. Those who are signed up in advance to make comments will be called on first. If you are joining us virtually and would like to make comments, please raise your virtual hand. If you're on the phone, press *3. If you have joined by computer or smartphone, look for a hand icon. This varies by device. One option may be to go to the participant panel, choose the raise hand icon in the lower right-hand corner. If you're in the room and did not sign up, I will ask for other speakers before closing this portion. I'll wait a minute to see if anyone wishes to raise their hand. Chris, has anybody signed up to speak or indicated a desire to speak this evening?
Yes, Chair Martz.
Excellent. Public comments are an important part of the public process. We take them seriously and factor them into the decisions we make. During audience comments, members of the public are invited to address the council regarding matters that are directly related to city programs, projects, services, or events. Anyone from the public who wishes to comment will have the opportunity to do so. Please direct comments to the whole council and not individuals. While this is not a question and answer session, we will contact you to follow up. If when recognized, unmute your microphone for virtual attendees or step up to the lectern for in-person attendees. State your name, address, and your relationship to the city, i.e. a resident, property owner, or business owner. Speak clearly and pause frequently. Limit comments to 5 minutes. If you are attending virtually and do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or if your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will need to proceed. You will be encouraged to rejoin the meeting if possible. Written comments can be submitted at any time to citycouncil@issaquah.gov. Personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior such as shouting, booing, clapping, or stomping feet will not be permitted. If a speaker is out of order, the presiding officer will direct the speaker to return to his or her seat, or for virtual attendees, may direct staff to mute their microphone. If the speaker does not comply, the presiding officer may take a recess to restore order. Disruption to the meeting occurs and order cannot be restored. A presiding officer may proceed to use one of the options provided for in RCW 42.30.050 to ensure orderly continuation of. Again, public comments, written and verbal, are an important part of the public process. The city takes them seriously, and we thank members of the public for taking the time to address us during our meetings. Clerk, can you identify the first person signed up to speak?
Yes, Chair Martz. The first person signed up to speak is Eric Olner. Mr. Olner, if you would push the button on the microphone base so that there you go.
Sorry, thank you. My name is Eric Olner. I'm a resident of Issaquah and a board member of the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank. I'd like to reserve my comments until after the presentation. I think that'd be more relevant then.
You are welcome to talk now, and then you are welcome to talk again when we take comment on the item that it concerns the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank. You can take both if you would.
Okay. Well, I think rather than be redundant, I'll just defer my comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
That is certainly your right. Do we have anyone else signed up?
Yes, Chair Martz, we do. Stephanie Norton-Brell has signed up. You want to defer?
All right. Thank you. And has anyone remotely, is there anyone from the public participating remotely?
Yes, Chair Martz, we have several members of the public in attendance virtually. None have indicated a desire to speak at this time.
All right. They may also be waiting. We'll see. All right. We do not have minutes to approve today's meeting. So with that, we will move directly into agenda item COM 0049, 179 First Avenue Southeast Surplus Report. And this is going to be Gene Justice from the our Administrative Services. Take it away.
Thank you, council members. Good evening. Jeannie Justice. I'm the Administrative Services Manager with the City of Issaquah in charge of facilities. So I'm here tonight to talk to you about the 179th I obviously don't come speak to you often enough. I have not mastered the process. I'm here to talk to you tonight about the surplus evaluation that was done for 179th First Avenue Southeast, which is occupied by the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank, and to ask you to provide input on the recommendations for the surplus and disposition of that property. So the direction that is needed tonight is there support for the administration's recommendation to surplus? Are there any significant concerns prior to proceeding to a public hearing and consideration by the full City Council? And then we have some feedback requested in terms of the determination for use of the King County assessed value, the method of the disposition, and any special covenants, restrictions, or easements that should accompany the surplus. Just a little bit of background about the surplus real property policy that was adopted back in the fall of 2022. It laid out a process and criteria for disposing of surplus property. And it follows, staff initiated the surplus process for this property back in April in a council memo. After we completed the facility condition assessment for the city properties, and we had several discussions with the Food and Clothing Bank regarding their interests in purchasing the property, as well as they had conducted some soil testing to see about any contamination that might exist on the site. The next step is the staff report that I'm presenting tonight. Then it will go to public hearing, full City Council review, and if there is a determination of surplus, Council would adopt that by resolution. Some guiding principles from the surplus policy were about providing the best stewardship and management of city assets, to avoid holding properties without a specific municipal purpose, and when it's not needed for a municipal purpose, to sell that property at a fair market value to finance other capital assets. The evaluation criteria that are called out in that policy ask us to look at the relevance of the property, the use, the condition, an analysis of some public benefit, and a consideration of other city uses for that property. The property that we're talking about is 179th First Avenue Southeast. It is located just south of here, across the street from the Trails House, adjacent to the Rainier Trail, also adjacent to the auto freight building owned by the Issaquah History Museums. So right in downtown Issaquah. It contains a one-story warehouse building that is 5,625 square feet, which is actually the same size as the parcel itself. It was purchased in 1989 and remodeled in that 1989-1990. It was formerly an auto garage place. It was purchased actually in partnership with the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank's predecessor for a permanent home for a food and clothing bank using community development block grant monies as well as some general fund money. The current King County assessed value is $534,000. We also have received a kind of a building replacement value, so that's just the building itself, for $1.1 million from our insurance agents. And a basis of value from realtors from between about $750,000 to $1.1 million. And so that's a general value of that property. It has been leased to the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank since 1992, about 35 years. Here's some photos of the current building. You can see the some of the operations that are happening in there and the warehouse style of the building itself. So when we look at, we go through the criteria, the relevance, use, and condition. The property is part of the Old Town sub area. It also is supportive of the Human Services Strategic Plan to support basic human services. As I said before, it was purchased in partnership with the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank and with King County Community Development Block Grants to provide a permanent home for the Food and Clothing Bank and Community Services back in 1989. It's been leased by the food bank since that time. Their current lease expires at the end of this year. The current condition of the building is poor. That was from our facility condition assessment that was completed last year. We have also, heard from the Food and Clothing Bank that the building does not meet their operational needs in terms of the function and form of the building. The annual operation and maintenance costs are pretty low, only $3,000 per year. However, the capital reinvestment that we're looking at in the next 10 years is about $500,000. And just a reminder that those kind of capital replacement costs they're really just about repair and or replacement of things that have reached their end of life. It's not about improving functionality or anything like that of the building. Some site
So that doesn't include a swimming pool?
No swimming
Okay.
pools.
All right. Good to know.
The site restrictions, so there are the current zoning is community facilities, which restricts ownership to city ownership for community uses. So zoning and land use changes would be needed if we would like to dispose of the property. We did initiate comp plan amendments this past September to do that on the 2025 docket. Currently, because the building is lot line to lot line, there is no on-site parking. And there is some minor soil contamination that would need to be removed before the property is redeveloped. We did consider other city uses of the site. There were no municipal services that were indicated during that conversation. So the site is very small. It's too small for our use for kind of the current public safety type facilities that we're talking about. For context, it's about a third of the size of this site right here for City Hall South. We did, so we looked at, we could surplus and rezone the property and transfer or sell it. The city could construct a new facility on the site and lease that for purposes, or we could have a land lease that would allow redevelopment of the building, but retain ownership of the property itself. So our recommendations were to consider the property for surplus and approve the comprehensive plan amendments in 2025, to dispose of the property and to accept the King County assessed value as the fair market value, to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement with the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank for that assessed value, and to maintain some special conditions on that disposition to ensure public benefit in the long term, to use the profits to support other facility needs. You might remember that the facility condition assessment gave us an estimate about $750,000 a year to spend on facility infrastructure needs over each year for the next 20 years. That we would retain the right of first refusal should the Food and Clothing Bank decide to sell the property or need to sell the property in the future. And then we had some discussion with the city attorney also about adding a time-limited deed restriction to ensure that the property maintained long-term benefit for the public. So some options would be for council committee members to provide some minor changes and improve the surplus determination for the public hearing and full council consideration, or to instruct myself to make substantial changes and return to the committee for additional conversation. So when we really kind of dug into the history of that piece of property and the intent of the purchase, the partnership with the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank, the use during the past 35 years, and the community benefit that's provided, as well as really the looming maintenance costs that would be assigned to the city. The administration's recommendation is to sell the property to the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank at the assessed value of $534,300, retain the right of first refusal, and add a 25-year deed restriction requiring the use for community services. And then further to ask council to approve the surplus determination and recommend this move forward to a public hearing and full council consideration on November 4th. So timing would be the public hearing on November 4th. The current lease expires at the end of the year, so we would need to do a lease extension on December 2nd with council surplus action sometime in January 2025. The comp plan amendments would be on the docket in the first 3 quarters of 2025. The food bank would like us to dispose of the property as soon as possible so they can feel assured of their ability to raise funds and whatnot. So we were recommending disposition in the second quarter, 2025. Are there any questions?
Deputy Council President.
Yeah, just to be clear, so we would dispose of the property, but we would not make the change in the zoning until later in 25. Does that work out okay?
Sorry, what was?
We dispose of the property in like a January, February of 25, but the zoning change might not occur till the end of 25 or close to the end. So is there any problem with that timing, or no, it doesn't prevent the Food and Clothing Bank from starting their fundraising and getting ready to take possession of the building?
Correct. We've had several conversations with planning that they would be able to proceed with applying for building permits and that type of thing. They would not be issued until the actual comp plan amendments were approved.
Councilmember Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question was, well, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. As I'm reading through the material, you're giving life to it, so to speak, and putting a story behind it. So much appreciated. First question is a 25-year deed restriction for public and community services a typical length, or could we go longer if we wanted to? And if that's a question for the city attorney and would be an email back to us, that would be great. But I'll just ask it today.
We base that on the fact that if you look at the original community development block grants, the longest time period that they ever put a restriction on a piece of property was 25 years.
Okay, thank you. And then you indicated that the proceeds from the sale would go back to the fund that they're originally from. What fund would that be? I guess the basis of the question is, do we have to give King County the money back to the CBD grant, or where does it go if we are successful with this sale?
City's general fund.
General fund.
Facilities.
Fantastic, thank you. And my last question just concerns a general question. It sounds like the city did a fairly in-depth analysis to determine, what's the, what can this property be used for in terms of municipal purposes? And then you kind of weighed that to decide, well, maybe it would be better to sell it given the fact that we have upkeep costs and maintenance costs, et cetera. I guess the question that we often ask in real estate or property assessment is this the highest, best use for this property by doing this transaction? Or is there something else that we should consider? And I know that the advocates for the food bank would say, yes, it's the highest and best use, but you did the analysis, so I just wanted to ask that question and see what the answer might be.
Yes, when we looked at the intent of the purpose, the whole reason that the city purchased this property was to provide a permanent home for the Food and Clothing Bank. And so technically, I would say that is the highest and best use.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And I actually don't have any questions. So we have reached the end of the question and answer session, which means, per my comments earlier, we are at public. So I will invite, we've already had 2 people that wanted to speak who chose not to speak at the start. So let's start there, and then we'll see if there is any other members of the public that want to speak to us. You don't have to both come. I mean, you can come one at a time. Or you can both come.
Thank you. Right, my name is Stephanie Norton-Bradel. I'm the Executive Director of the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank. And first, I wanted to thank Jeannie and Autumn for all their work preparing this report. And thank you all for considering this recommendation. The property in question, as Jeannie mentioned, was purchased in partnership with the Issaquah Valley Community Services, which is now the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank, for the purpose of operating a food bank and allowing access to low barrier services for people in our community. And we're very honored that we continue to do that today. We've seen incredible growth in the past few years, as many of you have heard. Since 2019, we saw a 115% increase in the unduplicated households visiting our market and using our emergency food program. So in 5 years, we saw a 115% increase. Over the previous 5 years, we'd only seen a 10% increase. So this growth is coming really fast. This year, we're seeing a 33% increase in households accessing our market and our emergency food program every month. No, excuse me, 33% of average number of people accessing our market every month compared to 2023. So 33% increase since last year from a month-to-month basis. We are really prepared to do this expansion. We have money in reserves. We've been working with the city's planning and zoning teams, and we've found that there's no significant impediments to redeveloping the property. We've started a capital campaign study, and so far it's quite promising, but it's on hold right now while we wait to see what's going to happen with this property. And we're also talking to the Issaquah Historical Museums about the adjacent freight building property and working on a partnership that would essentially be us purchasing the building, leasing back some space to them so that we have space to grow and continue to expand. Due to the urgent need for more space and the escalating costs, we're hoping that we can purchase this property sooner than later. And we really appreciate you considering this option. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Eric Olliner. I reside at 1779 Harrison Court Northeast in Issaquah. As I mentioned briefly, I'm a food bank board member. I believe that our chair, Mike Bresco, has sent a letter to the committee outlining many of the statistics and and stressing the urgency of what we're trying to accomplish. We, just in terms of highest and best use, I wanted to briefly address that. We did surveys to determine whether this current location is optimal for our clients serving the community. And that turns out to be the case. They're not only used to coming here, but close to public transportation, close to other city and community services. And so we feel like staying where we are makes the most sense. But the building is less than half the size that we really need it to be. And so we've looked at preliminarily a design that would allow us to go 2 stories, sight line to sight line, and if possible, negotiate the purchase of the auto freight building next door. And we've spoken with the county's historical commission about what we might need to preserve in terms of the structure and image of that building. So we're fairly well along in terms of the analysis. And as Stephanie mentioned, we're anxious to get going. So we'd appreciate your consideration and your decision as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Clerk, do we have anyone else indicating a desire to speak this evening on this topic, this item before us?
Chair Martz, I see no virtual hands raised among our virtual attendees.
All right. Jeannie, could you please put up the, there we go. Thank you. You read my mind. Discussion. Councilmember Joe.
First off, I really applaud the work that the Issaquah Food Bank does in our community, the volunteers that show up and the community members that will bring items from their garden, and the way that you have established the green grocery bag program that collects food on Saturdays is very inspiring. I think that this is a good idea to go ahead and surplus this property, and I would support the recommendation from the administration. I don't believe there are any significant concerns unless any of the soil surveys come up with something more serious, and obviously we won't know that until we get a little bit more in depth there. But you know, it's always a what if when you're doing feasibility studies and determining the viability of a site. I think that the 25-year time period for the restriction of the disposition is a good idea, and the right of first refusal for the city to maintain that or have an opportunity to get that property back should we need to, so that we can fulfill our other municipal missions in the city is a great idea. Other than that, I think this is a prudent step and a step that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Council President.
Thank you. I echo the comments from Councilmember Joe. It was a really good report. Thank you so much. Very thorough, very easy to understand, and it also showed a lot of back and forth, I'm sure, with people in the community and people at the food bank, and listening to their needs and also watching out for ours. So I really commend you on an excellent presentation. Is there support for the administration's recommendation? Absolutely. I think it's a very well thought out recommendation. I don't have any significant concerns. I too, like Russell Joe was asking, is 25 years enough? I know there have been 50-year covenants put on, but just something for us to think through before the final recommendation comes to the City Council. There are probably reasons for 25 and other reasons for 50, but if 25 is the preferred, I don't have any actual objection to that. It's just a thought that maybe that we'd like to keep that there practically in perpetuity. I think using the King County assessed value is a good way to go with this, and the disposition that's been recommended sounds good to me. And I think the deed that you've talked about, the deed protection in terms of right of first refusal is a really good one, because in my mind, the Food and Clothing Bank is an absolutely necessary thing for us to have in our community. Certainly during the pandemic, it proved its value, not only as a human services provider, but as part of our emergency response team. The expertise that was there in terms of food distribution during a crisis was just invaluable at that time. And also the creativity with which the Food and Clothing Bank faced the challenge of providing food to people in need during a crisis like the pandemic was really inspiring. So I think that all of this is wonderful, and I support it absolutely. So there.
Thank you. I'll add, this to me is part of, Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank is part of what makes us a real city, not a suburb. Where people come to Issaquah and they are struck by how we do feel like a real whole city. And I think part of that is what the services we provide for our residents. And so having a real downtown and having services in our downtown is just part of being a real city. And so I love that, I've been doing this for a while, and I know that there have been a lot of conversations about where Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank could potentially be. So I'm thrilled if our action today helps keep them downtown, where folks can both get access and are also more located than up in some of the places up in the hills. So very excited today. I'm in support of the administration's recommendation. I don't have any concerns to address prior to the hearing. I think that the terms in terms of first right of refusal are smart. Because we have first right of refusal, I'm not as concerned about 25 versus 50 because it's hard to imagine a different use of the facility that wouldn't involve a sale. But if my fellow council members want to have that addressed at the full council, I understand. King County assessed value as fair market value. I think that's good. I'm, as most of you know, I'm a sailor, and boats always, there's no such thing as an older boat that doesn't need a bunch of work. So knowing that this property needs a bunch of work, I think that this price point seems reasonable given that everything we know, and we're being good stewards of the public's resources by going with the King County assessed value. So with that, I guess we are 3-0. I believe the administration's recommendation was to have it come back on regular. I'm seeing head nods. Councilmember Joe? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it would come
There is a
back.
public
Yes.
hearing on November 4th.
Sorry, that would be before. I guess we should, you're right, we should probably have the public hearing first. All right, so 3-0 in favor of coming back to the, or going to the public. Thank you so much, Jean.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate it. With that, and people are invited to stay and eventually have public comment on the next one, which is COM 0060 Park System Plan Update with Jeff Watling, our Parks and Community Services Director, and Robin Spear, our Park Planning and Development Manager, and Hasanthi Hogland, our Parks Business Operations Specialist. Welcome all.
Hey, thank you so much, Chair March. Good evening, Council. Happy to be here. As you mentioned, joining me tonight is Robin and Hasanthi. They've done a tremendous amount of work on this effort that certainly takes a bit of time. Forgive me as I make sure, am I sharing?
Not yet.
Councilmember March, you weren't in attendance at the
I'm so
last
sorry.
meeting. There was a glitch in the director's computer, and he wasn't moving the slides forward. So we stopped him and had him do that because when people are watching and we're talking about items without seeing the slides, it could be very frustrating. So
Yes.
we want to make sure the public could have that access.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes.
I agree.
That's the basis for the technical
Oh, no,
hiccup
I
right now.
understand. And I'm I'm an engineer, right? So I think visually, and if I don't have visual cues, I get lost. So I'm all about the visual presentation. Finest minds working on this problem. Is that one of those Apple products? Is that an Apple? Is that an Apple? Oh, I see something. Yep. Analyst passwords. That down. Take your time. Measure twice, cut once. Normally, at this point, I could sing, but as you all know, my singing voice right now is temporarily down and out, so I won't be able to treat either staff or the audience at home with my vocal stylings. I do a mean Sinatra. I do. I'm not kidding. For charity, I've done Sinatra, who is, of course, the master. I mean, there's E plus ultra.
Right.
I really wish I could do some singing,
Apologize
but I
for the mystery here. Councilmember
okay.
Joe's.
we'll get there. But I literally cannot hold a note right now. Like if you just told me "Sing Mary Had a Little Lamb," I could not do the notes. It's just,
It's not like you.
this is 50 years of singing.
Right.
Just needed in.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, so I'm scrolling through, but it's
Oh,
not showing on the screen. So
can you
Chris,
maximize it?
we
Is
may
there-
need your help to do it. Forgive me. I know my laptop did this just last week as well. We're having a few HP laptop glitches. So. Well, as that's getting set up, we're so excited to bring the Park System Plan update back to you. Appreciated the conversation we had in July. Your feedback was so helpful. Since that time, we've had a chance to do a lot of continued work with the Park Board. Got some additional feedback from the Environmental Board, as well as a number of our other partners, including the Snoqualmie Tribe. So what you see tonight and what Robin and Asante will have a chance to present once the PowerPoint gets going, is some of those changes and some of the work that we did. Also, we'll walk you through a bit of the plan, actually sort of show you some of the pages of the plan, introduce you to that plan. You know, what this work reflects, similar to the 2018 plan that this updates, is this document really is the story of our park system. And when I say park system, it's our parks, open space, and trails system. And also the vision for that plan. Unlike many stories, this is a story with probably 1,000+ voices in it. As you'll see as we walk through this, there's a countless amount of community outreach to really make sure we're hearing from the owners of this park system, and the owners being the residents of Issaquah, and making sure this plan and the priorities of this plan really reflect their vision and interest. I'm going to sound like the old director here. I've been doing this a while, and I'm always fascinated when you try and tell the story of a park system. You can't tell it through one lens, and it's very rare that one family or one resident uses the entirety of the system. Our residents see our park system differently, and this plan really attempts to do just that, as you see within the vision. I'm now about to sing a song as well before the PowerPoint comes on.
A tap dance would be acceptable also.
Okay, yeah,
in place of
dancing was
singing.
not my thing.
Oh, so close. Oh.
Thank
Just a
you so
little
much.
thing in the corner. We get rid of the
Appreciate that.
board. Oh, there's the board. Oh, there we go.
Here we go.
Look at that.
Yeah, look at that. So we're here tonight to present this final document to you, seeking your recommendation to move it forward to council for adoption. Next slide. Timeline, we outlined this a little bit for you last time. As I said, the kickoff started in May of 2023. This has been a lot of work. You'll hear from Robin and Asanthe some of the community outreach touches that we did throughout this process. We also, you'll notice in October of 2023, with the Park Board reviewed our goals and policies. That was an important date to hit because as the comprehensive plan is coming before you as well, the goals and policies within the park plan as well as the comp plan were really intended to be the same thing. So getting that recommendation from the Park Board helped those goals and policies sort of start their different routes with the comp plan and with this document. As I said, we came to you in July. We did some further refinement, and we're here tonight to present that to you. So thank you again for getting the presentation up, Autumn or Chris, whichever of you did it. I'm going to now hand it over to Robin Spear to take it away from here.
Thanks, Jeff, and good evening, council members. I'm Robin Spear, Park Planning and Development Manager. And I'll start off by looking at the purpose of a park system plan. Then I'll move into committee feedback. Asanthe will jump in with planned content showcase. Then we'll move to Jeff, who will do our new Creeks to Peaks concept. And then back to Asanthe with Park Board engagement and recommendation. So first, let's go back and kind of look at the purpose of a park system plan. Park system plans are created and updated every 6 years. This is to ensure eligibility for state and federal level grants. Our last plan was in 2018, and it was a really good starting point for us for the 2024 plan. Eligibility for state and federal grants include like RCO grants, conservation futures grants, potentially EPA and other park grants. So it's really critical for us to have a robust system plan developed. Goals and policies are also incorporated into the city's comprehensive plan, as Jeff mentioned. We did add some new policies. We retained a lot of the goals we had. They're still applicable, but added in some new policies regarding artwork, regarding tribal engagement, and a more robust implementation. The plan also guides the community's goals and visions for the park system. We couldn't do this plan without community outreach, so that was kind of our number one goal and our number one intention for the plan is to get as much community feedback as possible. We did an initial survey where we had 749 respondents, which is great. We followed that up. I believe first they started off with focus groups. We did the survey. We did mapping, and we did a lot of just outreach, general outreach with the community. Both Asanthe and I were at the farmers market, got to talk to a lot of people there. So it was really great, especially me coming into the city as a new planner, to get to know the park system and to get to know the community better. We're looking at new level of service for the park system. First, I think initially it was more quantitative, which a lot of parks do. They measure it just based on the acreage per person. And we're shifting that to now look at more of a quality of our parks and developing new metrics for that. So you'll see that in the plan also. Lastly, this provides vision and direction for capital investment and budget decisions on projects for the next 6 years. Kind of leads me into my next slide. This graphic kind of shows the capital planning guide. And again, as Jeff said, this plan is really a 20+ year vision for the park system. Again, we're looking at system level assessments. It's updated every 5 to 10 years, really informed by asset management needs, life cycles, and growth needs. Again, going throughout this whole planning guide, we are touching base with the community and making sure that we're understanding their needs, we're still meeting their needs. Again, 20 years is a really broad look. Communities change 10, 15 years, so we have to keep coming back and making sure we're addressing everybody's needs. This leads into our 6-year CIP, where we're really looking at prioritization process. That's updated every 2 years and goes back in the lines with a big picture with current resources. That 6-year group moves into our 2-year budget like we're doing right now. And this is really a much more collaborative effort where we're looking at city council approval that moves into capital. We're integrating our capital budget and operating budget at the same time. And within that 2-year budget, those projects move into what would be a funded capital project. That's where the fun really begins, right? So on June 25th, we were here presenting our draft system update plan. And I kind of want to run through committee feedback that we heard and make sure that we addressed all your comments. We appreciated everything, all the feedback, all the comments. Again, we can't do this in a silo. It does take a huge amount of effort and a heavy lift. So I do want to thank our consultants design workshop, definitely the community who we outreached and tapped several times for feedback. And also our park operations staff, because without them, our parks don't look as good as they do. We heard that you want parks to be vibrant, but you also want quiet spaces for park users to enjoy. We've been talking a lot about the balance needed within the park system, where we want vibrant, active, fun parks with the shiny new toys, but we also really respect and want to keep preserving our open spaces, our natural spaces. That's what makes Issaquah so unique. The committee was pleased with the amount of public engagement in the plan. Again, our engagement was really robust. We got quite a bit of feedback, especially on the balance and the need for more field space. We wanted to maintain emphasis on trail connections, and being a trailhead city, it's definitely important that we look at our trailheads, we look at our trails, we look at the maintenance, and we look at our connections, especially in our proximity to other public land. It's really critical for us. I'm learning more and more about the trails and how they were used from the Native Americans' perspective, and how they are still used, which is really interesting. So we want to make sure that we have that feedback and we have that integration moving forward as well. We heard about development of playing fields so they can be used for regional tournaments to bring ancillary economic benefits to the community. We're definitely looking at that, but we want to make sure that we are serving our community first and making sure their needs are met with active recreation before we start really pulling in and advertising for more tournaments. Again, as Jeff keeps saying, we're land constrained, so it's difficult for us to find that available space. So partnerships are going to be really critical. The committee wanted to ensure matters of equity were addressed throughout the park system, and as you'll see later, our desire for multi-use spaces is becoming more and more important. Councilmember Martz, I know you talked about cricket, so I learned a lot about cricket this week, but we'll show you what it would take to put a standard men's-sized cricket field in 2 of our parks. I will pass this over to him.
Hey, council members, thanks so much for having us. I'm Hasanthi Hoagland, Department Operations Specialist. We've been working on this plan for a year, so we're really excited to actually be able to showcase this to you today. As you can see from this slide, the plan includes a brief overview, an introduction of the system, an evaluation of the entire park system, some direction for the future, and an implementation chapter. As mentioned previously, there will be showcases of specific pages from the plan. We're not going to go through every aspect of it, obviously, but if there are any items that are not included in here or you have questions about, please do let us know and we can pull the plan document. A little bit more about our community engagement. I know the team spoke to you all about our community engagement at the last meeting, and there's lots of pages included in the plan regarding this. But one of the key points that I wanted to highlight with our survey, and something that I've heard here at the city, is making sure that we're hearing from our actual residents. There's this concern that, these surveys are out in the public and many of our other park users, our neighbors, might also be taking this from neighboring cities. And one of the great things that came out of this review was 93% of the respondents in our survey have lived in Issaquah for more than 2 years. So that tells us that we really did hear from our residents here in Issaquah. And then some other highlights from this engagement was sort of the top 3 important essential investments that the community is looking for in the next 5 years. And that's completing our undeveloped parks, it's working with our partners, and renovating our existing parks and open spaces, which is really great to hear that they want to invest in the community facilities that are already here. And one of our other engagements that we did was a mapping exercise, and I just wanted to sort of highlight a few of the main topics that came from this. It underscored everything that we heard in the first survey, that there is this need for more improvements across various existing parks, including many suggestions for visions of expanded active recreation amenities, and being mindful of sustainable management and maintenance of those new amenities. And then another key outcome of this engagement was the need to focus on Tibbetts Valley Park and looking at durable all-weather turf for year-round use. That was a theme that came up multiple times in all of our park board meetings, as well as through the surveys, the mapping engagement, and some other public engagement that we did after producing the draft plan. There were also calls through this mapping exercise for a more interconnected park system and improving pathways and signage. This next page sort of is an overview of some of the analysis that our consultant team did. One of those being a walkshed analysis that really looks at how close all of our residents are to access a park or a trail. And I think what's really great here is 68% of our residences are within a half-mile walk to a park or open space. That's about a 10-minute walk. That's crazy good for a city. And then when you look at our trail access, about 56% of residents are within a quarter-mile walk to a trail, which really helps highlight the idea of being able to use trails to get around our city in a more convenient way. The consultants also did an equity priority area analysis to look at the impacts of social, environmental, and health considerations for Issaquah and to identify areas that might be experiencing the highest burden so that we can use that as we look at priority for investment. And then another analysis that the consultant team was sort of looking at some benchmarking and comparing our city to some comparable communities. And so you'll see some pages that sort of review how we stack up here in Issaquah as compared to Olympia, Redmond, and Ashland in Oregon.
Councilmember Joe.
Now, could I ask a question about the equity priority areas?
Sure.
When we're looking at that, and you could please guide my thinking, I was wondering if we're looking at whether or not people are close to outdoor space and parks and away from, let's say, an oil refinery or another item that would produce externalities that would be unhealthy for people. Is that the kind of analysis that we're looking at there?
So it did look at access to parks, access to trails. It looked at tree canopy cover as well. And I'm not sure that it looked as specifically into like certain environmental like factories like an oil refinery per se, but it did sort of look at overall health index information through the census for these different neighborhoods.
Okay, and help me with what health index means for those of us that are not census buffs. And if you don't know right now, you can just put it in an email. If you
I
want
might bring that to you in email and
Okay.
just check with our consultants, but more or less it looks at sort of how healthy our city is in specific areas of our neighborhood compared to national values. So it looks at usually like the top 5 different health indicators, heart disease, diabetes, things of that nature, and sort of compares those statistics for our city nationally. And overall, Issaquah is like much higher nationally, and that's also noted in this plan, but I'll make sure to get those specifics and send those to you as
Thank you very much. That certainly is the impression that I have living here for so many years, but seeing the actual numbers supporting that is very helpful, so much appreciated.
Yeah. I'll pass this back to you.
So in the winter of 2023 and up into the spring of 2024, we were started to review the park classifications, and in February brought this revised classifications to the park board. And really we wanted to look at the criteria to confirm the types of parks we wanted to retain, what ones we wanted to revise, and which ones we needed to add into the system based on growing needs and space restrictions and space requirements. Definitely looking at more urban classifications against some national standards, what other park systems are doing. And this helped us really align better with national trends, but lets us develop new types of parks and classification based on these classifications for the future. We really wanted to hone in on the primary use for each classification, but we also looked at acreage, if it was an active or passive use, what amenities were in each type of classification, and what amenities would be appropriate for each type. We looked at access, landscape and the environment, stewardship of natural or open space, or suitability within the citywide network. So community parks, neighborhood parks, and undeveloped parks and others remain the same. We revised resource parks to nature parks and natural open space to just open space. We did add in two new classifications, the greenways and the linear parks. Again, going back to the fact we may have more constrained land, more urban settings for our parks, and linear parks will kind of align with more narrow spaces and longer spaces. And again, our greenways, we've already started quite a few greenways. We just want to make sure places like Pickering Barn in that area actually aligns with the name of that classification and the type. Okay, within the plan, we did a lot of work on the direction for the future. And this kind of established a really good baseline that we used for other elements. We looked at our plan vision to inspire our community through a vibrant network of parks, trails, and open spaces, seamlessly intertwining from the valley floor to the peaks of the Issaquah Alps. And our vision is to foster connectivity, recreation, diverse culture, and appreciation of nature, while safeguarding and enhancing our precious natural resources for generations to come. We have a brand new plan concept, which Jeff will get into further, so I'll have him describe our Issaquah Creeks to Peaks Park system. Our core values, which are reiterated and emphasized throughout the plan, were connectivity, vibrancy, resiliency, and balance. Our goal statements, we heard a lot about our goal statements from the public and refined particularly balance and vibrancy. Strategies, 4 strategies were developed for connectivity, 6 for vibrancy, 6 for resiliency, and 8 strategies for balance. Again, that's a lot of balance is what we heard a lot from the park board, or what we heard a lot from the community, so we really wanted to emphasize that throughout the plan. And implementation. Our plan isn't good if we can't implement it. So we looked at our capital improvements program, our funding, and particularly partnerships, which we heard a lot about. Okay, and throughout that, we developed our capital improvement projects map and our plan for, again, looking at 20 years out. I believe we had 36 projects altogether. We divided those into our near, mid, and long-term. Near 1 to 6, mid 7 to 15, and then long-term 15 plus. And again, some of these projects, because they're gonna take so long, we did shift into the near term to get them started. Because if you don't start them, you're not gonna finish them. So this is just an example of how we developed our near-term projects. Again, we showed how each project hit our core value focuses. And projects differ. Some hit them stronger than others. So we wanted to identify and show how each one is differing in those core values. We looked at project cost. We looked at project duration. And we looked at project complexity. As you all know, projects are getting more and more complex. Permitting is challenging at times, but understandable. So we want to make sure that we're telling the whole story and we're being more transparent in our project and how they're going to evolve. And I will pass it over to Jeff to talk about our Creeks to Peaks.
All right, thank you again. So last night at Committee of the Whole, you got a little preview of this. So I will touch on it a little more depth, but not too much. So as I mentioned last night, this really represents a new concept to clarify and the green necklace concept, and to really build upon that green necklace and allow it to become more of a citywide, system-wide vision. A lot of community engagement throughout the process, but then even as we, since June, and introduced the Creeks to Peaks concept to you, as well as to the community, have gotten a lot of really good community feedback. We hear a lot of emphasis from the community about, as I said earlier, the role of the system, desires to have strong movement through the system, to make sure our system is protecting the natural environment, to make sure we have enhanced active recreation opportunities and elements within our system, to make sure our system is supportive of the migration patterns of habitat and wildlife through the city, and to make sure it also provides great human connection from neighborhood to neighborhood, and also out into the surrounding public lands. All of that emphasis really came to creating this definition of Creeks to Peaks. We really feel like Creeks to Peaks references in many ways the topography that we as a community celebrate in so many ways. To highlight a little bit about how the document goes a little further into Creeks to Peaks, we take a look at really three components of the system. What does Creeks to Peaks mean in terms of the natural connections and the natural fabric that our community so wants our park system to support? And also taking a look at the human connections, knowing as a community we have residents that are wanting to not only connect to nature but also recreate in such a wide variety of ways. Again, we feel like Creeks to Peaks in this vision begins to speak to how humans and how residents and visitors want to connect to their system and connect to nature. And then lastly, a third layer that we put into Creeks to Peaks, and again, the plan goes into a little further detail, is the trail connections themselves. And how do we really look at both in city and out of city, making sure those trail connections make sense. I think we have a great foundation in all three of these sort of connections and elements, but making sure, as Robin mentioned, and as you look at the definitions and the descriptions of those projects, the priorities of near, mid, and long term, that those projects are beginning to build bite by bite, project by project, a system that would be the envy of many communities around us. It's real for us in Issaquah to think we could create a system that is every part connected via trails. Pretty exciting. As Hasanti's coming up, I just want to give a thank you to Hasanti. I know you're hearing a few new voices tonight. Forgive us as we're bouncing around. You may recall when we launched this project, we lost a park planner. So we jumped into this effort in a bit of transition. Hasanti has done an amazing job of really being that bridge and that transition. With Robin coming on board in September, again, they've both done a great job. Hasanti serves as our liaison to the park board, So with that, you can outline all the great work that we've had a terrific group of residents as park board members steering this work.
Yeah, so along with all of the other community engagement throughout this plan, the park board has had a huge role in shaping this plan that you see before you today. They've had multiple touches to help guide, review, and advocate on topics related to our park classifications, the goals and policies section, how and when we did community engagement, reviewing the surveys responses and the mapping responses. They looked at our core values and themes. We did an in-depth discussion about our athletic fields and partnerships and how we can expand in places that we may be land restricted but still maybe have some opportunity. They also looked at our system analysis, helped us really create this Creeks to Peak Parks system vision, and looked at our project prioritization and multiple versions of draft reviews. They've really done immense work, and we thank them all for their insight, their thoughtful discussion and considerations. You'll see on this slide the number of meetings that the park plan itself came to them for over the year. And we're happy to report that at the August meeting of this year, the board took action to move the draft plan document forward into the City Council adoption process, bringing us here to you tonight. And with that, I'm actually going to pause this presentation and move to try to utilize Robin's computer to showcase the item about athletic fields to address a question that you all had from June. Right.
While you're doing that, and again, sorry for some of our laptop glitches. Up. So, excellent question that Chair Martz had at our last meeting when we were talking about equity. You brought up the question of cricket, right? And what would it look like for us to incorporate cricket either as a single use or a multi-use? Thank you, Autumn, as you're looking at this. So what you're seeing is, and I think what we shared with you is Central Park, we currently have some cricket groups utilizing that space. This is an aerial of what is known as Pad 3 at Central Park, where we have 2 soccer fields. A cricket group comes in and puts a portable pitch in between the 2 soccer fields and utilizes it as a temporary space. This overlay is an attempt for us to, and there's a second overlay, but it's a look at what a regulation-sized cricket field would mean in relation to or relative to those 2 soccer fields. If we were to, and you'll see in another visual, hopefully, we'll make sure it's at least in the minutes, is a similar same size aerial of Tibbetts Valley Park, and shows some of the realities that we have in Issaquah of we are, as a land-constrained city, our amount of developable land is relatively limited. As the park plan before you identifies, we really see, as we look at the needs for such a wide variety of sports, whether it's lacrosse, softball, soccer, football, cricket, any number of sports, to think that we could create single-use facilities for any one of them would be a real challenge for us, both financially and as well in terms of land. And so as we look at creating multi-use field spaces, we very much want to include the ability to incorporate cricket into that use, along with Central Park, for example, as you're seeing that aerial, that is currently accommodating youth football, boys and girls lacrosse, boys and girls soccer, baseball, softball, and cricket as well. Thank you, Autumn. So here, again, a similar, taking that same relative size dimension of what cricket would look like, what that would mean in terms of at Tibbetts Valley Park if we were to look at trying to incorporate a single use or a sole use cricket facility. What we've heard from the community, and as Asante mentioned earlier, Tibbetts Valley Park is a park we see as a high priority to reimagine. There's a strong desire to take what is really a baseball complex and create more of a multi-use sports facility. As we do that, again, we see with the growth of cricket a real desire for us to make sure we're incorporating the ability for cricket to be used in spaces like that as well. So rough visual, but there it is. And with that, thank you so much.
Sorry, I have a question
yeah.
about cricket. So this is going to display my ignorance. How long is a standard cricket event?
Wow,
Match,
I would need to find out. You know, most of the cricket use that's happening right now in our park system are youth games, and I know those are a modified length of time. I would need to find that out.
Because what I wanted to ask is how many games were being played of cricket per weekend, but I also wanted to make sure that if a game takes 10 hours, you're not comparing apples to apples with a soccer match.
Yeah, I could find that out. I could look at our.
I would just be curious to know
Yeah.
how many people are taking advantage of, because that's a nice setup, that temporary, the way you can use the space between the soccer fields, and I would just be curious to know how many folks are actually availing themselves.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We can get you that data as this moves forward.
Councilmember Joe?
Thank you. Director, you had talked about commenting on the comments from the tribe, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to do that if you could, please.
Pardon me as I'm jumping there. So as we interacted with the tribe, as we interfaced with the tribe, a lot of their feedback was around access to trails, continued ability to do gathering throughout our natural open space system, whether that's Tradition Plateau or other spaces, wildlife, and speaking to, as I said earlier, the need for our park system. Our park system plays such a role as migration routes for habitat and wildlife, and wanting to make sure we reinforce that. I think some other really important feedback we've heard from the tribe is responsible recreation. How are we, as we are managing and stewarding the public land, how are we stewarding in a way that it's not being overburdened by recreation, but as we're thinking of things like trailheads and trail use, not concentrating in one place, but making sure that use is sort of spread throughout the system and not impacting one area.
I appreciate that comment there. I was reading an article in the newspaper about Kama Beach Park. It's on the it's a camping area up by Stanwood and
Woodby Island, I believe.
Yeah. They have a state park that has a number of cabins in the area, but they can't. The board that oversees it is deciding to close the park because there's a known tribal burial area close enough that it impacts any new construction or renovations that might be done, et cetera. My question to you is, have we reached out to the tribe and had any discussions about things that we might need to preserve as a city as a whole, and perhaps in our parks, that are culturally significant sites or important for religious purposes for the tribe, et cetera, et cetera? I don't necessarily need an answer today, but would like to make sure that we are having that conversation along the way. I know the mayor has put in so much effort to have a monthly meeting with the Snoqualmie tribe, and I want to make sure that we're looking at all the different avenues that we can be respectful to the tribe and honor their contributions to this area.
Absolutely. I think it's a great point. No specific areas have come up, but from the mayor to our department throughout the organization, to the city, you know, as we're relationship building with the tribe, it's that kind of feedback, that kind of information that we want to hear. Tonight in the committee meeting, I just gave a real broad overview of some of the feedback, but the letter that they provided to us is attached in the packet tonight.
And I'll do a follow-up on that. Specifically in the paragraph titled Intergovernmental Partnerships, there's requests for specific language change. I mean, that letter came in August, and I think you said that the Parks Board approved in August. Did we make the changes requested of us by the tribe? Yes, I'm seeing head nods.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think that the statement in there about tribal consultation should be stated as its own tactic due to sovereign government-to-government nature of engagement, which is different from diverse community engagement, is super important.
Yes.
And the nature of our relationship with the tribe is unique in that.
Felt the same way.
Tribes.
Correct. So we actually added another strategy under one of our goals and core values to be able to speak to that.
Wonderful. That's a great answer.
And we've sent that update also back to our tribal partners as well for further review.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's a great answer. I have an unrelated question. We had some community engagement on the subject of archery, and statements made around that the Park System Plan Community Survey had shown some interest in archery. I don't see archery mentioned in this document, so can you talk to me a little bit about, did the Park System Plan Community Survey indicate interest from the community in archery, and if so, how do we want to engage on that? And I ask this because after we last talked about it, you know, I'm from Minnesota, and the southwestern suburbs of the Twin Cities, Bloomington, Burnsville, Apple Valley, Eden Prairie, all have had archery since I was a kid, and in fact, Bloomington still has the same archery field where I did archery 35 years ago. So just wondering how we feel about that, given I understand that people shooting projectiles, you know, even without gunpowder can be an area of concern, but, you know, tort law works the same in Minnesota as it does in Washington State. So I assume that they've been able to do that successfully without, you know, bankrupting their properties.
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you as a Parks Department, we've had multiple conversations with that resident. We are very supportive of the idea of archery as an amenity within the system. There are a number of things we need to work through with risk. And our insurance carrier, WCIA, we've already posed those questions with them. It did come up in public engagement. As you look at one of the appendix that really gets into the details of the document, you'll see in particular one of the last engagement exercises we did, the online mapping exercise. That resident did a great job of, in that mapping tool, you could note a comment at a specific park and then invite other residents to lend comment to that. So in particular, what we saw was his comment in support of junior archery at Tibbetts Valley Park brought 70 plus responses from others taking that survey saying, yeah, great idea. Relatively, that's quite a bit. In that same online mapping survey, residents who commented on additional multi-use fields or improved multi-use fields at Tibbetts Valley Park had 100 plus responses. So again, strong interest. What the document reflects in Chapter 3, actually Chapter 4, implementation, after you look at the near-term, mid-term, long-term projects, we also added a table that really speaks to park amenities and tried to call out what are these amenities that residents might not have been site-specific or might have been amenities that could be single projects or incorporated into a broader park redevelopment. And archery is identified on that table. So it is definitely in the document. We feel like it is, as we go into capital planning, as we go into implementing this system plan, it's certainly an amenity worth exploring and taking a look at and seeing how we can incorporate it.
And I will offer again, everyone in Minnesota knows everyone else. It's sort of required by law. So Ron Case, the mayor of Eden Prairie, is a friend of mine, and I'm sure we could get, parks to parks level conversations. They put archery in shortly after my wife and I and kids moved out here, and it's still there, and I believe it's been quite successful at the park that was about a block from my old house. So, if we wanted to talk to another parks department about what to do or what not to do, or how to make our insurers more happy, I'm sure that Mayor Case would be glad to help.
That's great. That's very helpful to know. Like I said, yeah. Work with WCIA and our own work will really look at how we could incorporate that.
Thank you. Other questions? More to present?
No, we're at the end.
Direction
So
needed.
thank you so much. Sorry for, again, thank you for our song and dance. We did end up singing and dancing, just not singing and dancing
Metaphorically.
through this presentation. But thank you. Again, direction we're seeking tonight is your recommendation and furthering this on to full council for adoption. But look forward to any questions and just feedback that you all have. Thank you so much.
Well, before we go to feedback, we no longer have any members of the public in attendance, but I will ask the clerk whether folks online have expressed any interest in providing public comment on this item.
Chair Martz, we have no virtual attendees at this time.
What? Well, all right then. We enter into the discussion phase. Deputy Council President? Sorry, I thought you were moving to the mic.
And will. So I'll just be very brief. I think this was a wonderful presentation and obviously well thought out, well sourced in the community, really amazing engagement. And I think it is very reflective of where our community is right now on parks. And I don't have any suggestions for improvements or additions. So yes, I would be very much in favor of sending it forward for adoption. Thank you.
Councilmember Joe?
I echo the sentiments of Deputy Council President that this should go on to the council for approval. I'll make just a couple of comments on the impressions that I had, and I came away quite impressed with this plan overall, and that's quite a compliment to you, Director, and your staff for picking up when we lost a planner, and I think we didn't even see a misstep or any kind of slowdown in this process, and that's quite a credit to you and your staff there that it was able to smoothly transition to get this done. I'm quite impressed with the equity priority areas that I had a question about earlier. As I mentioned, I've always had the impression that we have a great natural environment, and our parks are a significant contributor to that factor in our city. And just having the solid numbers, so to speak, or looking at the priority areas based on census data does help give us those facts behind what I think our citizens are seeing every day that helps them be very proud of the park system that we have. Also impressed that 68% of the residents are within a half-mile walk of the parks and open space. It's just tremendous that people can get out their front door and within 10 minutes be in a park. And 56% of the residents are within a quarter-mile walk to a trail, and that's a 5-minute walk, to get there, and get out into the natural environment and away from the city urban world that we live in so much of our time. So those numbers are fantastic for showing the value of our park system to our citizens and how well we're planning for the future as well. So just compliments to you and your staff. I would approve moving this forward to the next step. Thank you.
Thank you. I will add, I think this is a very good document. I think it's important that it reflects the public so strongly and engagement with the public, because I think we're entering a really challenging time as a city. This committee deals with the three biggest expenditures out of our funds, right? Police, fire, and parks. And parks is rightly, one of the big three. And I think that we all know that we are under real challenges. And, you know, the Parks Department has been able to expand a lot of things greatly over the 15 years that I've been here. But, you know, it's probably not going to be looking at expansion for, I mean, there will be improvements onto the system, but, you know, a lot of it is going to be what do we maintain and what do we hold dear as we look to be very, very careful with our money coming up. And that's where I think this plan will be most important, is to come back, to be able to come back to council and say, these are hard decisions, but these decisions are anchored in what we've heard from the community. That's where this is going to be worth its weight in gold. So I'm also supportive of bringing it back. Was the administration recommending on regular business?
Yes.
All right, so are we 3-0 in favor of, yep, 3-0 in favor of coming back to regular business? So Jeff, thank you, and thank you for your staff here this evening. Great presentation, great conversation. Any closing comments from my fellow committee members? Oh, right. Well, and then with that, that was our last item for this evening. So, clerk, we have no other business, right?
Any announcements?
I do not have any announcements. So with that, at 7:56, we are adjourned, and thank you for watching.